Yeah.
All right, here we go. Welcome to Sports Econ 101, the show where we discuss sports topics from a business perspective. I'm your host, Edward Brown, along with my co-host, Bruce McGowan, longtime sports radio personality. Today's show is going to be extra special because of our guest. He's the last pitcher to win 30 games or more.
Yeah, Denny McClain, of course, was setting all sorts of sports fans and sports writers on their ear with just a memorable and incredible season in 1968, and his team went on and won the World Series that year. So it's a real privilege to get him on and talk a little bit about the great moments of the 60s and some of the wonderful moments for the Detroit Tigers.
Okay, and at each commercial break, we're going to ask a trivia question where the first three emails with the correct answer are going to win a vacation to the Lighthouse Resort and Marina. The vacations are free. Their only request, a $75 cleaning fee to cover their housekeeping expenses. And here's the interesting thing. This is the first time I've done this now. Usually I just have regular trivia questions. But today specifically, I'm going to have baseball trivia about Denny McClain.
I love it.
And when he comes on, I want to see if he can answer the questions. Because sometimes you never know. I might ask questions you might not even know.
Okay.
Of course, Wikipedia can only give you so much.
That's true.
Sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not.
This is true.
Okay, you can listen to Sports Econ 101 on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Sports Byline USA, CRN, and many others around the state, around the country. This segment of Sports Econ 101 is sponsored by Pacific Private Money, providing mortgage investments currently yielding, get this, over 8%, secured by real estate at loan-to-values of under 60%. Doesn't get any more conservative than that. You can check them out at pacificprivatemoney.com. You're listening to Sports Econ 101. And again, when we come back, we're going to have Denny McClain. We're going to ask him some questions. He said that we're free to talk about a lot of things with him. So we really appreciate Denny. We're going to be, we're always nice to our guests. But, we can ask hard questions, and then that's okay.
Denny is a guy who's been through a lot, but he's been to the mountaintop. And he's also taken some stumbles along the way, but he's a good man, basically. I've interviewed him many times years ago. He probably doesn't remember, but we'll get into it with him, and we'll have a good time with him.
All right, so stay tuned. You're listening to Sports Econ 101. When we come back, we're going to be having Denny McClain on.
Yeah. Denny, I was going to say, I did interview you a couple of times back in the day.
You guys are really bouncing all over the place with the hookup here.
Oh, it is. I'm sorry. Yeah, he says he's. Can you hear us okay? If we get on real close.
Well, remember,
a little bit better. That's me. Yeah.
Well, he can't hear you through that. He can only hear you through this.
Oh, okay.
So it's like yelling. So it's like if I talk over here, he can hear me really well. If I talk over here, he can't.
Okay, but if I'm
you're
talking
gonna,
this way,
you're gonna have to yell.
But he says he's hearing me better now. You're hearing me better, Denny?
Yeah, I think you just need to get closer.
Yeah, you get close to the mic. Okay.
Well, again, it's closer.
Okay.
For him, it's closer to that.
Okay, whatever.
Okay, so let me
I'll just project a little
Okay, so let me. Yeah, that's how it works.
That's the key.
Okay, so let me just save this file here, and then we'll get right into it.
Okay.
This is going to be, and so this will air this Saturday.
This Saturday. Okay. Gotcha.
That's the 20th.
All right, then you just hang on. We're just about ready to start here.
Almost ready to go.
Appreciate you. Hey, Denny, are you living still in Michigan, or are you back? Where are you?
Yeah, no, we still live in Michigan.
Okay. In the Detroit area?
Yes.
Okay. Are you still married to that same gal? I remember her years and years ago. Is she still with you after all these years?
51 years.
Wow, that's great. I want to bring that up sometime too, because that's a great story.
Okay, so here we go. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with Bruce McGowan. Bruce, why don't you introduce our guest?
It's a big thrill to bring in Denny McClain, who was, as you mentioned in our opening, the last Major League pitcher to win 30 or more games. Did it back in 1968. Of course, that was the year the Tigers stunned the defending champion Cardinals, came from 3-1 down. They were back actually trailing 3-1 and won the World Series that year. And Mickey Lolich, Denny's teammate, won 3 games. And Denny, I want to talk to you first of all about that 68 season, because you had a pretty darn good year in 67, but did you see anything like this coming where you were going to win 31 games in 1968?
Well, I don't think anybody can see it. I mean, I've been pitching pretty well because I'd won quite a bit of ball games in 65, 67. 67, of course, I got hurt early September, so I lost the chance of winning 20 that year too. And I wound up busting up my foot. Got a broken foot right now too, but that was a little less damaging in the form of broken bones. This was like 7 broken bones, but the grand scheme of things, no. I knew we were on to good things. We had a great ball club. I thought we had the best ball club in baseball, 67, 8, 9. '67, of course, we lose the pennant by half a game in the last day of the season, and we won it in '68, and we should have won it in '69, except all the Orioles won about 105 or 106 games in '69, so that was a little tough to catch, but we still won 90-some ball games.
Wow.
So the game was never better than it was in the middle, late '60s, early '70s, and there's a number of reasons. First of all, we didn't have as many teams, so the talent has got to be much deeper. The pitching was certainly much deeper. And the guys came up through the minor leagues. They came up with fundamentals. They saw the game being played by the best before they got there, rather than some kid coming out of Idaho State and all of a sudden playing in the big leagues a week and a half later. That just doesn't get it. It doesn't work. And I think while the game today, may be more exciting, I think it's more exciting because of the lack of fundamental baseball. And, they make a lot of errors. They miss cutoff men all the time. When's the last time you've seen anybody bunt successfully? So, part of the game is gone, and I think that's a tragedy that they, one day they need to deal with this DH thing, make it one way or the other. But I'd sure like to see him get rid of the DH. It's always been one of those things that have bothered me.
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous that during an all-star game, if they have it in an American League park, they have National League park, they have the pitchers hit. I mean, well, why? I mean, people want to see good ball players hit the ball.
I guess I'm a counter to that. I'm a National League fan. Grew up a San Francisco Giants fan, and I always loved. I know people don't like seeing pitchers hit, but I always loved it when Bob Gibson or Don Drysdale came up. They were pretty good hitters. How were you as a hitter, Denny? I'm trying to remember. I don't remember you being.
I led the American League a couple of years in a row with sacrifices. I had a lot of sacrifice months, but I think it was about a 150 or 160 hitter career.
Mm-hmm.
And but if you get to hit enough, you should be a little bit better at it. But it's the big thing about that is no matter how good you were in high school. In fact, one year in Chicago, I led the entire city of Chicago. I hit 600 one year, led the city, and I figured I'd be the greatest hitter in the history of baseball. And on the whole, as I saw the first curveball or slider, I said, "What the hell was that?" I've never seen that before. So that equalizes your talent pretty quick.
Yeah, but the other thing is, how much practice do you really get? How many days when you pitch? Once every 5 days. You get.
No, we pitch every 4 days.
Every 4 days. Okay.
We pitched on Monday, and then we pitched on Friday again. So that was a regular routine. And if you were going well, you were having a pretty good year, then in fact guys would get bumped if you were going well. Today they get their turn no matter what the hell happens. So now they can throw a guy out there because of this craziness of these 100 pitches. And even if he's getting his butt kicked in the first 2 or 3 innings and doing all kinds of crazy things, not winning, just giving up runs, hell, they let him stand and throw 100 pitches anyway. Excuse me, it almost becomes like an exercise rather than a real serious baseball game.
Yeah. Denny McClain is joining us, a former major leaguer who won 31 games in '68. And Denny, you hearken back to that era where I was a young kid in high school watching those games, and I remember staying home from high school my junior year to watch you guys play the Cardinals. But before that, you beat the Oakland A's, and I think it was Don Wirt got the game-winning hit, drove an out K-line, and Dizzy Dean, the last guy to win 30 games, was on the field with you, giving you a big hug afterwards. What do you remember most about that game where you beat the A's and broke the 30 mark?
Well, not a whole hell of a lot. It's been quite a few years ago, and memories are great. And of course, it seems like the more you talk about the past, the greater you were. Not that in fact is true, but I remember. First time Reggie Jackson came up, I hung a curveball to him and he hit a 2-run homer, I believe. And then just to prove that that was lucky, really lucky, I think this was his first year also, I hung another damn curveball and he hit another home run. Those are the 2 big memories. I remember Al, of course, running out of the dugout with me in that famous cover story in Sports Illustrated. Great picture of Kayline and I coming out of the dugout together and some of the other stuff. But it was just, it was a great day. We had 50-some thousand people in the ballpark. People were just jumping up and down. But we had more reason than that to be jumping up and down. We were leading the league. We needed it because we had had so many bad things happen in 1967 in Detroit. We had 45 people get killed during the riots. We had fires that were so incredibly nasty and horrible. That we were trying to recover from that. And the most perfect thing in the world happened. Detroit Tigers were in a pennant race. Newspapers were on strike, which was a great blessing for the city, and not only the city but us, because we had the most negative writers in the history of the sport, or otherwise.
Even Joe Falls was negative. Was he that way?
Yeah. They were brutal.
Oh boy.
Especially during that period of time.
Yeah.
You couldn't find anything to say nice about the city or the baseball team or the football team or what have you. They were really on a negative trip, and you wonder how much of that negativity actually had a lot to do with the fires and the riots, all of the tumultuous garbage that went through that town. And here we are, 60 years later, 50 years later, we're still trying to recover from 1967. And, we work at it every day. That's all you can do.
You know what's interesting is, and I don't know why, I never liked St. Louis. So when you guys were playing St. Louis,
No, I was the same way. I hated Bob Gibson and Lou Brock. I wanted the Tigers to win because they beat the Giants out.
Well, I guess maybe that's what it was.
Yeah.
They kept beating the Giants. And, I respected Bob Gibson as a player, of course.
Good enough.
It's like I was so rooting for the Tigers, and so when they won, it was great. In fact, I still remember some of my baseball cards. Obviously, I remember Denny. That with that face, right there, and Bill Freehand in his crouch. I mean, there's something, and you're talking about baseball cards that are, almost 50 years old now.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but you had, so you had K-Line, you and Lolich and Freehand. I think
Willie Horton.
Willie Horton. Just the five of you guys could have taken on any team, right?
Yeah. That was a heck of a core, huh, Denny?
Yeah. We had a hell of a team. We had a catcher who was an 11 or 12-time All-Star that never gets a vote for the Hall of Fame, Bill Freehand.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that. 11 or 12 times an All-Star and never gets a vote. And he finished second in the MVP award two or three times and never gets a vote.
Wow.
I mean, it's disgusting. And I'm not condemning any player that's gotten the Hall of Fame because if you're on the ballot, you deserve to be there. But not to consider a guy like Freehand with all of his credentials and his resume is sinful. Then we had Norm Cash.
Norm Cash. Sure.
McCullough at second base, Ray Arthur at short, Don Ward at third. Then we had Horton, Gates Brown, Jimmy Northrup, Mickey Stanley, and K-Line. So how much better could it get?
I mean, sometimes I think if somebody doesn't stand out, like with controversy, or they just play the game, sometimes they just kind of get overlooked with that. Hey, Denny, stay with us for a minute. We're going to go to a commercial break here. Sure. So here is the first trivia question about Denny McClain.
And Denny, don't answer this till after the break.
Yeah, that's right. Because we want the audience to get a shot at this.
Yeah.
Okay. After Denny McClain supposedly threw softballs to Mantle to allow him to hit a home run to break Jimmy Fox's record, who was the next batter who asked for the same thing?
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
And for those who don't remember, we'll talk about the story afterward. But we want to know who was the next batter.
And we'll find out if this is legend or not.
Yeah, that's the other question we'll find out. Okay, so the first 3 emails with the correct answer are going to win a free 3-day, 2-night stay at the Lighthouse Resort. Email Edward at sportsecon101.com the answer to this question. After Denny McClain supposedly threw softballs to Mantle to allow him to hit a home run to break Jimmy Fox's record, who was the next batter who basically asked for the same thing? All right, stay with us. You're listening to Sports Econ 101. Okay.
So, Denny, is that a true story or is that just legend?
No, that's true.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I won't ask you. We'll ask you on the
air. Yeah, we'll ask you on the air.
Next guy. That's a great story. That's a great story. How's the weather back in Detroit today?
You guys are really bouncing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Really.
Well, luckily,
try to stay near the mic.
We'll stay near the mic.
It's really difficult to hear you.
Luckily for us, everything is recording just fine here. But
okay, good.
Yeah. No, there's no variation.
Yeah, no, everything is perfect for the show.
How's the weather back in Detroit today, Denny? Because I know you guys have
80 degrees, a little humid, but after the last 5 days, we've had 5 days of torrential downpours here. We finally got a day off.
You guys, throughout the Midwest, I was reading even in Colorado where I went to school, it's just been crazy this spring, huh?
It's been horrible.
Oh.
And we haven't had it bad until the last 5 or 6 days, but we're getting pounded, or not today, but
we could
start up again tomorrow night or Thursday.
We need the rain because we're in the middle of a drought. Not so much here in the Bay Area, but in the Central Valley where all the food is grown. It's just terrible.
My wife's trip back east got totally destroyed because her friend got into Chicago and all the flights were canceled. So, I mean, it's just an absolute disaster.
That's a terrible situation because that happens at least several times a year.
Well, Chicago just buried yesterday while that big hockey game was going on.
Oh, yeah.
Just
I heard they had a heck of a time getting the trophy from the airport to the arena.
The trophy was 30 minutes late to the facility.
Wow.
It won it, and 30 minutes later, the trophy showed up.
Wow. Okay, you guys ready? Here we go. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Edward Brown here, along with Bruce McGowan. When we cut to the first commercial break, we asked this trivia question. Again, the whole theme today is Denny McClain because he is our guest today. After Denny McClain supposedly threw softballs to Mantle, Mickey Mantle, of course, to allow him to hit a home run to break Jimmy Foxx's record, who was the next batter who asked for the same thing? Okay?
So, Denny, who was it?
Joe Pepitone.
That is correct.
Joe Pepitone.
Yeah, I figured, Denny, if you were going to ask all these questions about you, you better get them right.
The only time in his life, and actually what happened was Mantle hit the home run, of course, and did his swan dance. And Joe came up and asked for the same pitch, and I threw a fastball behind his head.
Yeah, that's right.
I love it.
Thoroughly knocked him down, and he was sprawled on his back. And what had happened was, no one knew that Joe wore a toupee. So once I knocked him down, and he apparently didn't have his helmet on right, his helmet went one way with the hair, and he went the other way. I think it is a goose with no clothes on.
I love it.
I believe it was the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life.
That's great. What a great story.
Yeah, apparently he takes the bat and he puts it over the plate like, hey, come on, give me a softball too.
Yeah.
So the reason, the story that I heard was that you idolized Mantle. And, and so that was the reason.
That was my guy. That was my idol, him and Kaylin.
Wow. Did you grow up in Michigan, Denny? Because I know you live there still.
Born and raised in Chicago.
Born and raised in Chicago. But Detroit was sort of a rival then. Or were you a Cubs fan or a White Sox fan?
Cubs fan. I always grew up in the house with the Cubs, and my father wouldn't have it any other way. You ever mention the White Sox in my house, you're in your bed.
Oh, my God. Ernie Banks must have been a big hero. Did you get to meet him?
There were a whole bunch of them. I wore the number 17 my entire career because of a pitcher with the Cubs called Bob Rush.
Oh, yeah.
And Bob was a big right-hander, about 6'4", 6'5", and would hit home runs. He had a lot of home runs in his career, too. So that was my guy growing up. You know, we all have somebody growing up. And
sure.
Bob Rush was my guy.
You know, I'm thinking back again to '68. You went up against Bob Gibson, who might have been the meanest, toughest, most intimidating pitcher of any era. And I remember in the first game of that World Series, he set a record. I think he struck out something like 16 guys and just shut you guys down.
Bob had a great day. I mean, Bob caught lightning in a bottle that day and struck out 17 of them.
17, okay.
Also, I want to remind everybody, and nobody remembers this because we're all so damn old, but what happened there also was that was the first and only time in the history of the St. Louis ballpark that they allowed people to sit in center field where they normally have it blocked off so the hitters don't lose the baseball in the shirts. That too contributed to it. Now, on the other hand, I also pitched that day, and I think we got beat 3-0.
Yeah.
The bottom line simply is, listen, it is what it is. You catch lightning in a bottle on the right day, you look like Cy Young reincarnated. But you know what? When it counted, Mr. Lolich stepped up, and he won 3 ball games, and Mr. Gibson only won 2. So guess who won?
Yeah, that's right. Mickey Lolich, great story too, because he had that big belly. But man, he was such a competitor, and he was cagey. I mean, he knew how to.
And what people don't realize and recall is that Lolich, our manager Mayo Smith, and our pitching coach Johnny Sain, was probably the best pitching coach in the history of the game. Johnny Sain and Mayo put Lolich in a bullpen for 45 days. He couldn't get anybody out. And he was very inconsistent the years that I played with him up until after I left. But the thing about Mickey was he had such great stuff, and you just could not convince him how to pitch. There's a thing called the art of pitching, and Mickey just never got it. And although he did grab it in the middle of September that year and then went on to have one of the greatest World Series pitching exhibitions that anybody had ever seen, because he was bringing it. And in the 7th game of the World Series, he was really, we could still be out there unless we scored a run to win, but he was just tremendous. Just can't say enough great things about him that year during that World Series. And he wasn't the tenacious competitor that people thought he was. Mickey much reminded me like Sam McDowell. Sam McDowell was one of the hardest throwers in the history of the game. Sam would get a guy no balls and 2 strikes. Now, when you get a guy no balls and 2 strikes, you don't lollipop the curveball up there or throw him a changeup. You go get him. You either throw a real hard fastball inside, hopefully it's a strike, or the pitch is hittable. And Mickey is much like Stan. They like to screw around when they got a guy 0-2. They would much rather embarrass a guy than go ahead and get him out.
Or wait a minute, Denny. What about the thought about everyone would be expecting a fastball, so you want to try to throw a hitter.
You got a guy. Listen. You just threw 2 fastballs by a guy. What? All of a sudden he's going to become Joe DiMaggio in his prime on the next pitch. It doesn't happen. Now, if you make a mistake, the guy may be able to hit the ball somewhere. And the better hitters know how to handle an 0-2 pitch, but not any better than anybody else. How many guys do you know had a career where they hit with 2 strikes on them over 300?
Yeah.
Find me one.
Maybe Tony Gwynn, and he might be the only one.
The art of pitching demands 2 things. You get a guy in the hole, you go get him. That's number 1. And number 2, you never throw a break. You never throw an off-speed pitch when you are ahead of a hitter. You never do. Why give a sucker a chance?
See, and that's
kind of what the pitch before it was.
And Denny, you just put your finger on it. That's the only reason I'm not pitching in the big leagues.
Those are the only 2 reasons.
That's the only 2 reasons, and I'm 55 years old. But like I told Billy Bean, hey, I can still throw in the high 60s if you need me.
Well, I'm thinking.
So you're throwing the ball at 120 if they let you throw 2.
There you go. That's exactly right. Well, you mentioned some of the names of that era. Ernie Banks and Mickey Mantle and Al Kaline. Who were the tougher hitters that you had to face? Guys that might have had your number. And I bet you there were some hitters that we may not have really, our listeners may not have heard of, who really were tough to get out for you. Can you give us a little clue?
I really only had one. His name was Gene Michael. Later he was a shortstop with the Yankees, a switch hitter. And he later became president of the Yankees, general manager. He was still a big shot with the Yankees. Good guy, too, by the way. And I was just recently inducted into the Ted Williams Hall of Fame. And lo and behold, Gene Michaels is the guy they picked to introduce me. Now, in my career, Gene Michaels, his career, he hit, I couldn't believe it. I didn't even know it until they announced the numbers. Gene Michaels hit 420 off in my career.
Are you kidding me?
Roger Hornsby's number.
You can Google him tonight. And
wow.
He did hit 200 in his career in the big league.
I was going to say, he barely broke the Mendoza line for crying out loud.
Well, you know what, Denny?
It was unbelievable. And he never hit a home run. All he did was, I bet he had, 50 base hits, and I bet 30 of the bats got broken. It was just one of those guys. But outside of that, if you have your normal, decent, good stuff, there's not going to be anybody that's going to wear you out. It just doesn't happen. The game is the game, and the pitchers are the pitchers. And if you know what you're doing, you can throw strikes, and that's the key. Just nip in the corners and always having a 3-hour game is the silliest thing. I mean, we used to play in an era where our average game was only about 2 hours and 2 hours and 10 minutes. And we took great pride in hit the ball up there all the time.
Being efficient.
Moving the game along. They don't have that pride anymore. They just, everybody seems to me that they want to embarrass the guy rather than get it out.
Interesting.
And then you got the exceptions. You got the David Prices, guys like that who know how to pitch, who know what the hell they're doing. And they have this great big rule that David Price says, you go home with the girl that you took to the dance. In other words, his best pitch is his fastball. Whenever he gets in trouble, what do you think David Price throws? He throws hard fastballs in normally. And most of the time, 90% of the time, David Price is the winner.
Yeah.
Denny, you mentioned about Ted Williams, and so I wanted to ask you, could you care to talk about your relationship with Ted when he was managing the Senators?
Ted and I didn't have as bad a relationship as people think we did.
Okay.
We did agree on 2 things. Number 1, he thought the dumbest people in the world were pitchers, and I thought the dumbest people in the world were hitters. So we had a basic philosophy difference. But Ted was in charge. Ted was never for the trade when I went over to Washington. He just didn't want it at all. The only reason they really traded me to go to Washington was because they were looking for a boost in the attendance, which they got. But on the other hand, we didn't add anything to the ball club as far as winning ball games. I mean, if there was anything, we probably got worse because it was just, listen, the Washington Senators in 1971 have to go down in history as one of the worst ball clubs in the history of mankind, number 1. Number 2, we couldn't hit a cutoff man. We couldn't bunt. Never got a base hit when it counted. But on the other hand, they were the greatest 24 guys I ever played with in my life.
Really?
They knew they had the shortcomings. They knew they could play like the other guys in the big league. but they had fun with the game. They went out and they worked as hard as they could every day. They took extra batting practice every day. They did everything to get better. They just didn't have the fundamental talent to go along with it. And we had many arguments on the bench with Ted Williams as to, got to take extra hitting, got to take extra hitting. Well, and listen, I just brought out a new book. I want you to read my book. So everybody would take extra hitting, read Ted's book, and everybody would still hit 210. So, you know, it's
because they're reading the book instead of hitting.
But you guys know, if you don't have the talent, you don't have the talent. Otherwise, everybody would be in the big leagues.
That's right. Hey, Denny, stay with us. We're going to cut to the second commercial break. And again, all these trivia questions today are about Denny McClain, our guest. And which, by the way, you know, he's the last pitcher who won 30 games. Do you know only 11 pitchers in the 20th century have done that? And you know, nowadays, especially you got Sparky Anderson in the 70s with the quick hook. You know, it's just
and five-man rotations
exactly.
too. Yeah.
Okay, so here's our second.
Sparky moved more pitchers than Attila Hunt.
Okay, here's our second trivia question. In 1969, Denny McClain shared the Cy Young Cy Young Award with another pitcher.
No, that's wrong.
That's wrong?
Whatever you're doing, whoever it was shared it with me.
Okay, excuse me. In 1969, there was another pitcher who shared the Cy Young Award with Denny McClain. It was the first time in history that two players shared the award. Who was the other pitcher who basically stole the thunder?
Yeah.
Okay?
He did.
All right. Stay with us. You're listening to Sports Econ 101.
Denny, this is great. We really appreciate that. This is wonderful.
Yeah.
Love having you on. So how many, now you have been married to the same woman all these years. That is wonderful.
Well, I'm married to Sharon Boudreau, who's the daughter of Lou Boudreau.
Yeah. God almighty. I remember reading about, you know, how that happened, how you became the husband of the daughter of a great player, and that's a neat story. We can talk a little bit about that.
Probably, maybe the greatest father-in-law of all time. He just was a wonderful person.
Oh, sweet.
Last act, the first moment I ever met him.
That's
nice,
great.
Nice. We should mention that.
Okay.
Mention that. Okay. Really appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, this is great, Denny.
You know, it's funny. I've done a couple interviews with you over the years when I was working in San Francisco, and unfortunately, the guys that we had, our producers, wanted me to just hammer away with all the stuff that had been going on instead of talking about the, you know. And I understand it, I do, but it's just like, come on. I mean, how much do we have to be negative about? I mean, I know you've been very forthright in the years now, having to deal with that stuff, Denny, and I appreciate that.
Because one of the questions
in the grand scheme of things, I've had one bad moment in my life. That's when a drunken truck driver killed my daughter. I mean, the rest of it is chump change. It's a pimple and a goat's ass compared to everything else.
Yeah, because I did want to ask you, like, what would you tell young ball players about, you know, how to stay out of trouble? So we can get into that. Okay. All right, here we go. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Again, I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with Bruce McGowan. When we cut to the second commercial break, we ask this trivia question. Again, today's themes are all about Denny McClain, because he's our guest today. In 1969, and the way I'll word this is correctly, the way Denny said, there was another pitcher who shared the award with Denny. All right? It was the first time, it's a Cy Young Award. So it was the first time, the first time in history that two players shared the award. Who was the other pitcher? Denny?
Mike Cuellar.
Mike Cuellar from the Orioles. That's right.
Yeah. Latin left-hander. I think he was he from Puerto Rico or from the Dominican or?
Yeah, I think Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico, yeah, pretty good pitcher, but not.
No, good pitcher.
Yeah,
good pitcher. That was during that era when they had Jim Palmer and David Kelly and Cuellar and Matt Dotson. They wound up getting over there. They had. So 1 year they had 4 20-game winners.
Yeah. Then you got 1970. I mean, they lose 69 to the Mets and they win in 70. Yep. So when we were at break, we were talking about marriage, and you know, people tease me because I've been married 25 years. And
I'm coming up on my 20th.
That's right.
With my wife.
And the idea was my wife said that if I didn't stay in shape when I was 50, she was going to trade me in for 2 25-year-olds. So now we get into where Denny has been married for how long?
51.
51 years to the same woman.
I married the daughter of a Hall of Famer, Sharon Lou Boudreau. Sharon is my wife, and we had 4 great children, and we now have 7 grandchildren. And,
wow.
You know, life is great. Life is good.
And Denny, you know, you have talked openly about some of the things that have gone on in your life. You haven't had it easy after your baseball career finally hit the rocks. You had some things going off the field that were rough. But you mentioned during a break about how that really pales in comparison with life itself, because you lost your daughter in a horrible car wreck. I mean,
people talk about some of the other stuff once in a while. I hear it less and less now, but the bottom line is, we've had one pimple in our life, a serious monster pimple. It's when a drunken truck driver killed our 24-year-old daughter. He was drunk as a skunk. It was one of those things. And we know he didn't do it on purpose, but anybody who gets in a car or a truck drunk, I think there's some purposeness involved there. I mean, because why would you get in there if you were thinking sanely?
Yeah.
That's all of the other things are nothing. They're like I've always told everybody. All the other incidents that people want to talk about from time to time are like pimples on a goat's ass, and they mean little. They have little meaning, but to lose a daughter, it's got a great.
I can't even imagine that. In fact, I was reading a little bit about that, and I noticed the date, and it was exactly 2 weeks after my son was born.
wow.
Oh my God!
I was just thinking, I just can't imagine losing.
Well, I got a 10-year-old at home, Denny. I'm an older father, and I know that the bond that you have with your children is for those that don't have kids, they don't know what it's like. For those of us who remember our childhood, we remember how much our parents meant to us. And I mean, how did you get out of that well of despair and
I don't know. I can only tell you that it's 20 years later now, and it's as relevant in my life today as it was 20 years ago. There's never a day that goes by that she's not a part of our conversation somewhere, some way along the line. And she was. And I don't say it just because she was my daughter, but she was always super special to me. Obviously, she was also my firstborn. But she was just very unique. Never had exception of her mother, that I ever met anybody that cared about everybody. And she was just like her mother, and just like her mother is today. I mean, the two of them are saints. I mean, literally saints.
51 years with the same woman. I mean, I know that sometimes things aren't easy during a marriage, but it seems like your wife, I've always read that she stuck with you through the tough times.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's been a tough fight once in a while, and of course, we're just like anybody else. You'll have an issue once in a while, but we have, Sharon had one great thing going for her that I didn't. I mean, she grew up in a baseball family, grew up with a great baseball guy and a great baseball mother, and so she knew what the life was all about long before I ever had a taste of it. And I mean, she introduced me to more craziness when we first got married about the game, and tell me stories about this guy and that guy. And because her father was not only a Hall of Famer, but he managed the Chicago Cubs, he managed Kansas City, he broadcast for like 27 or 28 years for the Cubs. I mean, he was a real player all of his life. And on top of that, like I said earlier, it's just you couldn't buy a better father-in-law than what Boudreaux was.
Well, what's interesting is he knew what the baseball world was like. I was wondering, like, how he felt when she said, "Hey, Dad, I'm thinking about marrying this guy." And you go, "Wait, a baseball player? Holy smokes, forget it!"
But did you get to know him pretty well long before that, Denny, or were you guys?
No. He was held in such esteem. It's really tough to say hello to him. I mean, Lord Almighty.
Wow.
I don't think I really got to know Lou for, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 years after I married Sharon. And but that's how. And he was not intimidating in the sense that somebody walks into a room and is intimidating. His persona, his walk, his gait, his conversations that he would hold, they were intimidating because he knew so much about everything. Graduate of the University of Illinois and a great basketball player on top of everything else. The guy really knew what life was all about. He had a great family and everything else. He was just a wonderful person.
Is he still around?
He's been dead for a while.
He passed away about 10 years ago.
Yeah. But you played in an era, we talked about the 1960s, it might have been the best era in the history of pro sports for that matter. Think of the personalities.
I think so.
Well, I mean, think of the personalities, whether it was Oscar Robertson or Jerry West or Wilt Chamberlain or Jim Brown, or in your game, Bob Gibson and Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle, and on and on. How about Al Kaline, though? Because I didn't get to know him, but I've interviewed him several times when he was broadcasting with Tigers. They'd come out and play Oakland. Yeah. And what a gentleman, what a sweetheart.
I'm glad you brought him up. We hear so much here about Cabrera. And I made a comment on the local show here last night or the night before. And I said, boy, am I glad you brought up Kaline's name. And he said, why do you say that? I said, well, all we hear about is Cabrera. And I said, I'm not saying Cabrera's not a good hitter. I said, I think you got to wait to call him great. But I said, he's a very, very good hitter, and he hits monster home runs. I said, but let's also give some consideration to the pitchers that are out there today. Got a lot of AA, AAA pitchers, and he's hitting a lot of home runs off those guys who years ago would have never made the big leagues. But K-Line, I saw Al play for 8 years. Al K-Line was the best everyday player I ever saw in the game. Now, I didn't play with Clemente, I didn't play with Pete, I didn't play with some of the great players, but I can tell you on a regular, everyday basis, no one played the game better. And I'm talking about hitting the cutoff, man. I'm talking about cutting the ball off. I'm talking about balls to the right base, being in the right place if something happens in the infield. Al K-Line was 360 degrees all the way around that ballpark. He not only did it, but he could tell you how to do it the right way. That's the kind of act he had.
Hey, when you think about Al, you never think about him having a bad day. One of those players.
I suspect that's true. I mean, you never ever do. He just was one of those guys that walked the walk and could talk the talk.
I was so happy for him when you guys finally won it too, Denny. We're talking to Denny McClain because he, in the, I guess it was the critical fifth game of the World Series, you guys, I believe, were trailing to the Cardinals, and they were up 3-1. And I think, tell me if I'm wrong, Al got either the tying base hit or the go-ahead hit, and it was fairly late in his career. He hadn't had a great series, and that was sort of the turning point for you guys, one of the big turning points anyway.
Well, Al was out most of the season. He broke his hand, and he did get back into shape and being able to play again until September, but the timing is, it's just like Lolich. Lolich was sucked most of the year in '68, and then, of course, he catches lightning in early September. K-Line comes back off the DL with a broken hand. So those two guys came back, and they were on fire. The two of them, I mean, they just they did exactly what they would do if they were not hurt and if they were really concentrating on the game. Because without the two of them, I mean, we certainly don't beat the St. Louis. But on the other hand, even when we were down 3-1, we thought St. Louis, to be honest with you, a little bit of tongue in cheek here, but we didn't think they were very good because they had one pitcher.
Yeah, that's true.
They didn't have anybody else. And we just couldn't figure out what the hell is the National League all about. This club three guys who couldn't get volley putts out. We thought.
Yeah, see, there you go. So you had the confidence that kind of helped, drive you through.
Yeah.
So, Al, Denny, I want to ask you, what would you tell young ball players today, especially about trying to stay out of trouble?
Well, the biggest thing is you got to go to school. I mean, I do a lot of speaking at appearances, and I talk a lot about education. Without an education, even baseball and football and they don't want you either. Nobody wants you if you can't read and write. And there's one thing, because even, and I'm not talking mentally, I mean, you got to dig into the books and you got to do the right thing. Because baseball today, football and basketball and hockey, they're complicated. They're much more complicated than they were 20 and 30 and 50 years ago. You just don't go out there, drop the puck, and go play. You got to be a part of a team. You got to be part of the chemistry. You got to be part of the scheme every time you step on the field or in the ring. And the bottom line is you got to have the ability to comprehend, to understand what it's all about. And we'll never see another Bonderman like we have in Detroit. Here's a kid that can throw the ball at 95 miles an hour all day long, and he couldn't read and write. He didn't understand the game, and then eventually got hurt. But the bottom line is you've got to be able to think on your feet, because there's no pitcher in the world that ever stepped out of the mound that didn't get in trouble the day that he pitched.
That's true,
I mean, sooner or later, and so that ability to think, the ability to react immediately, that's what it's all about. You've got to have composure, you've got to have confidence in yourself, but more importantly, you got to understand what's going around you. That starts with a good education.
And then also, I think one of the toughest things, Denny, today, everything is open to examination, because the internet has changed everything. You can get on Twitter and sort of get your message out, but you can't say anything to anybody anytime without the prospect of it getting out and being blown up all over YouTube today. And that's not.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Because Lord knows, I'm glad none of that was around when we were playing. I can tell you, it's a nightmare. I mean, I don't know. I mean, to say a player or a high-profile individual's got to be guarded is an understatement. I don't know how they do it. I don't know if they planned their day like that, or they just say, the hell with it, whatever happens, happens. But it is what it is, and I think we all take better notice of it than we've ever had before.
What teams you like to follow nowadays? And not only are you a Detroit guy all the way with the Lions, the
Well,
Tigers.
I'm a Detroit guy,
Yeah.
but I'm a Chicago guy. I mean,
Sure.
born and raised, like I said earlier. When I'm a big Cub fan. My Chicago Blackhawks won the Cup last night. Our basketball team is showing great signs of life finally. And our Bears, God, I don't know what to do with them. I don't like our quarterback there, never did. But sooner or later, we're going to win something again. We're going to have a Mike Ditka year again like that. But I hope I'm still around to enjoy it.
There you go. There
Well,
you
you
go.
must have enjoyed the Bulls run for quite a while.
Those were great years, weren't they? I mean, that was just fun to watch.
Hey, before we let you go, I got to ask you about one of my favorite people associated with Tiger baseball, Ernie Harwell, who passed away only about 6 or 7 years ago and broadcast your games for many, many years on the radio. And again, just a true gentleman. Can you just tell us a little bit about Ernie Harwell? Because a lot of our younger listeners don't know who he is, and he was a fixture in Detroit for years on the radio.
I don't know how long he was on the radio, but I think Ernie was probably on the radio at least 40 years, 45 years. And he became, well, I'm not one of the big proponents of putting broadcasters into the Hall of Fame. He certainly is based upon just his reputation, his character, and all the other things. He certainly belonged in the Hall of Fame somewhere. He was a great gentleman. That's one thing I can tell you. Ernie and I, I'm a keyboard player, and Ernie and I used to, when we were on the road, we'd go in the hotel room once or twice during a trip, and we'd sit there and write songs.
Cool.
And had a great time. We had a great relationship. It was a sad day when the Tigers first fired him. Mike Ilitch found out that he really wasn't running this town when it came to Ernie Harwell.
Hey, Denny, can you stay with us?
Back, they had a saved grace. I mean, the whole town was almost rioted over Mike Ilitch. There was no reason to fire Ernie Harwell, of all people, for God.
Okay. Hey, Denny, stay with us. We're just going to cut to the last commercial break here. In only one time in history, baseball history, that a pitcher won the MVP in each league. What year and who are the pitchers? Stay with us. We'll have some closing comments on Sports Econ 101. Okay. All right.
So we'll say goodbye to Denny here, and then thanks so much again, Denny.
Yeah, Denny, thank you so much.
Well, just a quick thing, and we'll say goodbye. What are you up to these days? We didn't even ask you what you're doing. Are you pretty much retired? Are you doing any work?
Oh, no.
You're doing a lot of public speaking, you mentioned.
I own a small railroad company and a steel mill, so not a steel mill, but a steel company. So
okay.
That's how you broke your foot.
Wow.
What's that?
That's how you broke your foot.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Damn railroad tie.
There you go. Those things weigh a ton.
You got to stop kicking them.
No, you just got to stay out of the way when somebody makes a mistake and knocks them over.
Oh, jeez.
Ouch.
This was horrific. This was just, I got 12 rods and steel pins.
Yeah, and it's not fun when it happens when you're older either, because it takes a lot longer to heal.
Sure does.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are. It's going to take someone a long time to heal up. This has been horrendous.
That's it. Okay, we only have 2 minutes to go. We'll just get this thing done. All right, here we go. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Last time for today, I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with Bruce McGowan. Third and final trivia question. In only one time in baseball history, a pitcher won the MVP in each league. What year and who are the pitchers?
You know the answer to that one, Denny?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't have any idea either.
1968, Denny McClain and Bob Gibson. I thought this would be the easy one for you.
Oh, boy.
I think I kind of misunderstood the question.
Oh, okay, that's all right.
I got it.
Denny, it's such a pleasure getting a chance to talk to you. You sound like you're doing so well, despite the foot problem. And what a great storyteller you are. And, geez, it's just been a thrill to have you on. Thanks so much.
Well, gentlemen, anytime you want a little chat and chitter, you just give me a call, and I'd be glad to share the history and the memories of the game.
I love it. Thank you so much, Denny. Appreciate it.
Guys, have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
All right, Denny McClain. Well, I tell you, I had no idea because, as I said, Edward, when I was working at the All Sports Station in San Francisco, KNBR, for many, many years, I had him on, and this was about 20 years ago, and he was going through some rough times. He'd just gotten out of prison, and there was he went through some really tough times. He did some stupid things, but and he was, I thought, really having a lot of problems. I didn't realize he's doing so well outside of the foot problem.
I know, it was a pleasure to have him. He sounds like he's in great spirits.
Great storyteller.
Except for his foot, with the railroad tie falling off.
Yeah.
Okay, here's our thoughts for the day. The first rule of holes: if you're in one, stop digging. Okay,
that's a good idea.
A good one. And adversity causes some men to break, others to break records. It's an American writer, William Arthur Ward.
Okay.
I'm not sure who he is, but that's a good saying. All right, tune in next week to Sports Econ 101. We're going to be discussing sports topics from a business perspective, giving away more free vacations for answering sports trivia questions. And again, we want to thank Denny McClain for being our guest today. Excellent interview. Appreciate it all the time. Thank you again to my co-host, Bruce McGowan, and to the audience. Thanks for listening. On behalf of our team, I'm your host, Edward Brown. We'll see you next week.
Good night, America.
So long. Okay.
Well,
That was good.
Yeah, that was true.
That was really
Like I said, I didn't think